Video now released of last week's deadly Chicago police shooting. Coming up, a look at the incident plus reaction to the police cam footage. Joining me now on set is Antonio Romanucci. He's a principal partner at a Chicago law firm, Romanucci and Blandon. You have actually taken on cases in the past where you've gone against officers, accusing them of police misconduct.
Yes, I have sued the city of Chicago and its department members for allegations of police misconduct and abuse. So I'm familiar with these cases.
All right. Well, the reason we asked you here today is you've seen the Paul O'Neill video, the police video.
I have.
And we want you to help us analyze it a little bit to try to understand where this is moving now. It's pretty graphic, even with some of the video apparently missing. But as you looked at it, what was your first impression?
Well, what you really have to do is start analyzing it from the beginning. And I think it was good to see that we had a couple of minutes before the officers actually engaged Paul O'Neill, because you have to consider the totality of the circumstances. And what we know is that there was a stolen Jaguar, and that's really about it. There was no evidence that he was violent. There was no evidence that he was armed. What we did know that this was a crime involving stolen property.
It appears that he was trying to flee. He wasn't agreeing to just stop and talk to officers. It appears, but again.
Agreed. We don't know exactly what was happening at that moment, but certainly it appears that Paul O'Neill was not compliant during that time period. But what's important is when that officer exits the car, he's already drawn his gun. His gun is in his right hand, so he already is predisposed to using it when he puts boots to the ground and is ready to, put his gun on sight.
At a vehicle driving away, it appeared.
Which, number 2, is against department guidelines. You are not to shoot at a moving vehicle unless that vehicle presents an imminent threat of bodily harm or death. So he begins to shoot at a moving vehicle with at least one officer possibly in the target range too.
Well, yeah, the other part of this is, and there's a little bit of missing video because as we've been reporting this past week, when the actual shot was fired that hit this young man in the back, the fatal shot, the officer that shot him, who was chasing on foot at that point, they were out of the vehicles, chasing on foot, but it's not entirely clear how it all went down because the body cam the officer was wearing, apparently it was not recording properly.
It wasn't recording properly. And with the body cams that were recording, isn't it impressive how clear those videos were? So can you imagine, had that body cam been working, we would know the 100% truth. We would know what happened to Paul O'Neill and how he was shot, whether he was running away, at what angle he was turned to the police officer or not. But we don't have that, and we still don't know why that camera wasn't operating.
And the word is that he was, when this all was over, he was unarmed, O'Neill, apparently. But that's what police are saying anyway. Or at least that's what I believe the autopsy, or somebody was saying he was unarmed, so it makes it look worse for police. But I would think that you said a key thing. It's not 100% what happened here in terms of were the officers in the wrong, or did they perhaps do what they needed to do because O'Neill was some sort of a threat? So therefore, when you're saying it's not 100%, I guess when it goes to court, this means there's room for reasonable doubt, depending upon how the attorneys handle it, if there are even charges filed.
Right. We don't know whether or not charges will be filed. And looking at this videotape, I think there could be criminal charges filed here. I don't know exactly which ones. I don't think we're at that point yet to determine what kind of criminal charges. But clearly, there were so many violations here from beginning until end on this tape of department guidelines that at a certain point you have to wonder, what was this officer thinking? Was he not cycling through the process? Even though this was only going on in seconds of time, you have to be trained well enough to be able to make those kind of decisions that do not take away life. And that's what happened here. Paul O'Neill, without knowing it, had committed a death sentence when he stole that Jaguar. That's not what should happen.
And I think what also looks bad for these officers, I would think, as a layperson looking at this, is that you have the police superintendent, Eddie Johnson, right away came out and said 3 of these officers are, they're off duty now because this was violation of department policy in his view.
Well, what Eddie Johnson did by doing that, I can tell you, in my opinion, that really went a long way to cracking the code of silence and the blue shield that exists in the Chicago Police Department, the one that Rahm Emanuel just 2 months ago admitted exists. By him coming out and not defending those police officers right away and saying that what they did was justified, rather he took reasonable and objective judgment and looked at it and said they did violate guidelines, that's restoring the trust that we should have in the community. Now, what those officers did, that doesn't place a lot of trust in us and how they police. That's bad training. I think that really goes to training more than anything. But if we look at beyond the big picture, what Eddie Johnson did in the face of extreme tragedy here, because this is a train wreck.
It is, right.
What he did was very restorative.
Okay, well, I want to thank you so much for joining us, Antonio Romanucci with
Thank you.
Romanucci and Blandon. And just to let you know, you can go to CLTV.com for more of our coverage of this story and to see the full unedited videos of the Paul O'Neill police shooting, all just released today by IPRA and CPD. The online version, though, does also have audio, which we'll warn you does contain some profanity.